DHS here yet?
I didn't see.
Yes. Yes, DHS is on.
Yeah, they're in.
Okay.
And I see Councilmember Jonah is in. I see a lot of our board members are in. So it is.
Jeremy,
Yeah.
I just want to say before we start the meeting, and this goes to everybody that's attending the meeting, we are civil. We have questions. We have a right to ask questions. We do not have the right to call names or to get loud or disrespectful in any way. So please keep the meeting cordial, get all the information we need to get, and have a good meeting. That's all.
Yeah.
That's it, Jeremy. The ball's in your court.
Yeah, and we understand that homeless individuals are a vulnerable population, and we're not here to, if you want to try to vilify anybody like that, we will cut your mic, unfortunately. So, so that aside, it is January 11th, 2021. It is 6:31 p.m. There is a quorum. This is the BXTV 11 Housing Committee meeting, and the meeting officially started at 6:30 p.m. Hazel Mira is the chair of the committee. You want to introduce the Lantern Community? I forget the exact name. I'm sorry. I think it was Lantern Group that was emailed to me.
Lantern Community Services.
Okay, great. So I think, Hazel, you want them to present first, right?
Jeremy, why don't you ask everybody to mute their mics that are not speaking?
Yes, please. I'll mute everybody right now. You have the ability to unmute yourself. Please don't. It will disrupt the meeting. Homeless Services will be leaving sharply, I was told, at 8:30 p.m. So if you need to say something, you have a question, do so in the chat. The way the format's being run tonight is, so we'll hear from the Lantern group. I'm sorry, it's not the group anymore. They will correct me on their exact title. We'll hear a presentation from them. Board members will then ask questions. We'll hear from elected officials, and then we will turn it over to the public for any questions they may have. If you have a question right now, put it in the chat, and we will get to you. If we can't get to you by 8:30, we will get to you. We will definitely save your question and email it to Department of Homeless Services and/or the shelter operator. All right, Hazel, anything else? Did I forget something?
Yeah,
No.
Jeremy, I think it's Hazel's committee members that get to ask the first questions, then the rest of the board members.
Okay. Anything else, Hazel?
No. First of all, I'd like to thank everybody for coming to our meeting. There's an item on the agenda that we won't be speaking about today because we were not able to get anybody from DHCR to come and speak to us about COVID relief, but we will try to get them at our next meeting. So we're going to have hopefully a short presentation by the Lantern Community Services regarding a shelter that they want to put and I believe at 1682 Stillwell Avenue within Community Board 11. So for right now, I'm going to turn it over to them for their presentation.
Thank you, Hazel. I'll be sharing my screen for the presentation. Please let me know that everyone's able to see it just fine.
Eleni?
Yes.
Was DHS going to speak first? I thought they had something they wanted to say just to start off. Was that true?
So this is Molly Park from DHS. I just want to, I can very quickly say thank you for having us. We really appreciate being here. This particular site is part of a much larger initiative that I know many people have heard about to really reimagine how we provide shelter services in New York City. We have been aggressively closing some of the sites that have been had the most challenges over the years. We have shrunk our footprint substantially, but at the same time, replacing those sites with much higher quality sites that are built to serve the needs of providers, to serve the needs of people experiencing homelessness. We do absolutely want to work with and hear from communities. That's why we're here. We're really interested to hear your thoughts and your questions, and we want to be able to answer as many of them as we can. I am actually going to stop talking because I think I am the least important person here. We want to hear from Lantern, and then we want to hear from all of you so that we can answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Molly. All right, I am going to share the screen. Can everyone see this okay?
All right. So, so first of all, I'm going to kick off our presentation, and then you can go to slide 2 if you don't mind. First of all, I just want to start out with some basic introductions. I always feel that it's important for people to have some sense of to whom they're speaking and who's speaking to them. So my name is Diane Luard Michel, as I said. A little bit about me, I have actually over 40 years of experience in the fields of affordable housing and with developing policy and programmatic solutions to homelessness, mostly here in New York City, but also across the country. I've done all my professional work I felt has been done alongside other stakeholders and communities and government and significantly in philanthropy. So I just want to give you a little bit of background on myself. I also wanted to just introduce Eleni, who just, as she said, is our Manager of External Affairs and Communications. She came to Lantern to run and manage our volunteer programs. She was a New York City Civic Corps member who are then recruited just based on her excellence in that role to the job of Manager of External Affairs. Now, Amy Berg is an LCSW, and she's Lantern's Chief Program Officer. She's held that position for about 6 years at Lantern. She has over 25 years of professional experience operating shelter, social services, and housing-based solutions to homelessness. So we can go to slide 3, the next slide. All right, so, excuse me, I'm just doing a little quick thing again. So just so you know, this is now just to tell you a little bit about Lantern's mission, who we are, and how we fulfill that mission. So Lantern's mission is to champion the well-being and independence of New Yorkers vulnerable to homelessness. As I said before, we really focus on housing-based solutions. We operate 16 supportive housing sites, our first one starting in the late 90s to the last one, which we opened last year. They're spread out across the city in both Bronx, Manhattan, and Brooklyn. And we also have gotten into emergency shelter. We are an emergency shelter provider with 2 sites as well across New York City. A little bit more about that in the next slide. I'd like you to also realize that, talk a little bit about what we do and how we do it, not just what we do. So at Lantern Residences, we really strongly focus on the use of evidence-based and comprehensive services, and we can call it holistic, you can call it comprehensive, you can call it humanistic, but we really do try to enable all of our residents, whether they are currently homeless or formerly homeless, to both find and to maintain stable housing. We have a very, very strong emphasis on working with them around health, education, and employment outcomes. And our real goal is to help them reach their personally significant goals as they stabilize and thrive. So a little bit, as I said, we do operate 16 supportive housing sites. 7 of those sites are across the Bronx, and we have affordable, sometimes mixed, sometimes exclusive, 100%, but they're in Community Board 1, CB2, CB3, and CB6 in the Bronx. This would be our first opportunity to collaborate with communities in northern Bronx. We also have 7 sites in Manhattan, and we have 7 permanent supportive housing. There's a residential lease-based housing. We have 2 more in Brooklyn, so that's the total of 16. We have 2 shelters. One is in Manhattan and one is in Queens. And I just want to stress that we really do, because in that over close to almost 30 years of experience, we have served various populations. We've also served not just target populations, but people who have a multiplicity of needs. And so I think we bring a vast experience, real compassion, and professionalism with the populations. And I'm going to turn this over to Amy Berg, who, as my chief program officer, is really she does both the science and the art of what we do. And so, Amy, I'd like you to take it away.
Thank you, Diane. Okay, we can move to the next slide. We're going to talk a little bit more specifically about Stillwell Shelter, which is the name we've given it because it's at 1682 Stillwell Avenue. So Stillwell Shelter, as it's planned, will be a newly constructed building designed to safely house and provide social services, meals, and recreation to 200 New Yorkers experiencing homelessness. In addition to the dormitories, there will be a private outdoor space, a large recreation room, a large separate dining room, a medical suite, and a social services suite. You can go to the next. This is a little bit about how Lantern does the work we do promoting stability and rapid rehousing. So the social services at the Stillwell Shelter will be designed to stabilize residents and rehouse them in the most independent setting as quickly as possible. To assist the clients in achieving housing stability, the staff will focus upon gaining regular income and employment, maintaining optimal physical and emotional health, developing and maintaining meaningful relationships with family and friends, and positive engagement in the community. There will be 4 social services teams led by a team leader or social worker. Additionally, there will be 2 recreation specialists working days and evenings to ensure there is a full schedule of leisure and therapeutic activities throughout the day, which support learning independent living skills. There will be a medical provider on site who works closely with the social services staff to provide initial and ongoing evaluations needed to apply for housing, and also to ensure all health concerns are addressed quickly. From the time of entry into the shelter, the Stillwell staff will be assessing the residents' financial, functional, emotional, and medical status, and work with them to set weekly goals to move quickly towards looking for housing. Our security model. Lantern has developed a blended model of security that includes working closely with the contracted licensed security officers from an established company, as well as residential security aides on staff who have the flexibility to also support our residents with independent living skills and coordination with social services, housing, and medical services. Overseeing the security staff are shift supervisors who will be present days, evenings, and overnight, who will manage the shelter's operation and coordinate service delivery under the direction of the shelter director and the director of program operations. The site design also calls for security cameras throughout the facilities, at the entrance, and around the periphery. These will be monitored 24/7 by the security lead, who will radio the shift supervisor and nearby staff immediately if there's a concern in any area of the facility. Oh, isn't there more?
What happened to community?
I think also the map you showed, I don't think that was the correct site.
Oh, Eleni? Okay, you're muted right now.
Sorry, I think I had an issue with the PowerPoint where something got deleted. Give me 1 second.
Yeah, we just had 2 more slides
Yeah, I
talking
know.
about
And I'll go back
communication
and
and
look at,
community.
I have it right now.
Okay, thank you.
Here you go.
Creating communication channels. Stillwell Shelter will have a good neighbor policy, which all residents must agree to upon entry. The good neighbor policy states that it is essential that shelter residents respect their neighbors and live and work together with the community in a quiet and safe environment. A phone, email hotline will be set up, allowing community members to provide feedback regarding concerns about the shelter or its residents. Phone and email hotlines will be monitored daily, and issues of concern will be directed to the attention of the shelter director and the Lantern Community Services senior staff. The shelter director and the director of program operations will reach out and develop a good working relationship with the local precinct and work together with the neighborhood coordinating officers to ensure coordination in any incident management. The security staff will be trained to manage incidents on site and exercise good judgment about when to call for emergency response. All Lantern operations staff will be trained in safe crisis management, which is a model of incident management and de-escalation that we train all of our staff in at Lantern. Building community relationships. The Stillwell Shelter will have staff available regularly to do outreach with local businesses and community organizations. Senior shelter staff will organize a community advisory board that will include civic and governmental leaders and local residents who will meet regularly to address shared issues. Ongoing Lantern staff will attend any community board meetings that are open to ensure they understand broader issues of concern that affect the entire CB11 community. That's it. Thank you.
Eleni, could you go back to the slide that had the site map on it?
Yes. Give me 1 moment.
No,
The slide.
I can't pull this up.
If it's helpful, because I did pull the image, but let me make sure that I have the right location if that's 1682. I know it's Stillwell Avenue, but I want to make sure that it's correct if that's the concern.
I will just say that we thought it'd be good to give a site map, but I can't see well. That's why I wear glasses. And I had a really hard time. I just didn't see all the cross streets, but
I see this seems to say Stillwell Avenue there on the cross.
I'm not
street.
sure if it's like our part of Stillwell Avenue, and I apologize if we missed something.
Yeah.
Normally I'm in my office and I print things out on a huge oversized paper, and then I can see exactly what I'm looking at.
Yeah, it doesn't look like it, but so whenever you can, we'd appreciate it.
Yeah. Okay, so what we can do is,
that's not the right site. I'm looking at it.
okay, that's a possibility. Lenny hasn't been to the site yet. Lenny will continue to look for it, and I think that we could go on, and then we could pull up that site map, the correct site map image as we go.
Okay. So.
Is that it for the presentation?
That is really it for our presentation. We wanted to keep it short and leave plenty of time for questions and answers.
Okay.
Do you have an image of the site if people want to see what it looks like overhead? Just for reference, this is the site. that we're referring
Yeah,
to.
that's,
So it is at the edge of Pelham Parkway South, on Stillwell Avenue, and you can see that it's quite off to the corner here.
yeah, that looks like it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Okay.
Okay.
I can revise the presentation and just send that over. Sorry for my mistake.
That looks like the right site, right, Oral?
Yeah, it's 1682. I think I wrote 1612. I'm sorry. It was a quick edit that I made.
That's the right site that you showed.
Yeah,
So,
that's the right site.
okay.
So, Hazel, it's your turn.
Okay, so thank you for that. I appreciate it. I was also a little confused when I first saw the map, but I'm glad that we got that straightened out. So just a little bit about myself. I work for a nonprofit organization in the Bronx. We've been around since 1982. And I am the director of housing and community development. We do services for tenants and landlords, mostly tenants, and we do a lot of tenant advocacy and tenant landlord stuff. So we deal not so much with the homeless population, because our goal is to keep individuals and families in their homes, but we know that homelessness is a big issue in New York City and in our communities. We are a very family-oriented community. We're a safe community if you compare it to other communities within the Bronx, and people, unfortunately, with COVID, we understand that the homeless population may increase at some point. You know, it really, this whole COVID has really turned everything upside down, and it puts fear in me when I think about the moratorium terminating, because we just don't know what's going to happen. So we in my office and in this community and this community board can appreciate the homeless problem, and we know that there has to be some kind of resolution to it, and we appreciate everything that you've done for that population. And that being said, as I was saying, this is a very family oriented neighborhood, and the location where you want to put this particular shelter happens to be, even though it looks commercial, it's really a residential area. And now that I see the map, you're like right behind a luxury apartment building that was just built not too long ago, and that's a concern to me. And it's going to be also a concern to the residents living within that area. People are moving out of New York, and we don't want them to move out of New York. We want them to move into New York, come back, because, and if you have to come back to our community, because, this is a great community. But I don't know if you're aware that 1,000 feet from this particular location, we have a charter school. And at, I believe the address is, hold on a minute.
1500 for the charter school. Pelham Parkway
Oh, no,
South.
I know the 1500 Pelham Parkway South, and at 1770, we have a UCP facility for children, and a senior center also at 1500 Pelham Parkway. And that's a concern to us. We also have a proposed shelter. I'm not aware of the process, where the process is right now. That's going to be located on Blondell Avenue. which that particular shelter is right for that particular location because that is all commercial space. But where you want to put this particular shelter on Stillwell Avenue is really not. It may look like it, but it's really not. It's a residential area. And I don't know if you guys were aware of the school and the senior center and the UCP facility when you looked at this location.
Excuse me. Sorry. So DHS, would you like me to answer from my perspective? Or
Well, why don't I jump in for a minute and give a little bit of context here that I think might be helpful. You know, as I think most people know, the City of New York has both a legal and frankly a moral obligation to provide shelter to anybody experiencing homelessness. And just to talk a little bit about what has happened to the census over the last few years, and particularly over the last 10 months, very challenging months. You know, the shelter census had been going up very, very steadily. There have been a lot of policies that have been put in place that that have helped to help individuals and households to avoid homelessness. Things like right to counsel for people experiencing eviction. And we had started to see some stabilization going into COVID. What we've seen over the last 10 months is that the Families with Children census has actually dropped very substantially. We're at the lower Families with Children census than we've seen since 2012. Single adults, on the other hand, has climbed very steadily for a whole variety of reasons. But I think, you know, you have lots of people who were living very close to the edge, right? Who had jobs that, you know, paid the minimum wage where they were able to stay in their homes. And then as the world shut down, right? As we all went through the turmoil that we have gone through over the last 10 months, that they were not able to hold on to their homes. It's very tragic. It's really unfortunate, but that is the situation that we are dealing with. So given the city's obligations to provide shelter and given where we are, we have to continue to add single adult shelter. Seeing comments in the chat box, of course, it is not the only factor here.
Yeah, we can ignore the comments in the chat. I'm keeping track of all the chats. I'm the chairman, the district manager. But I think, I mean, I don't know if that exactly answers Hazel's question.
No, sorry, I just wanted to provide a little bit of context about why, you know, first of all, because there was a question about census and about need at the beginning of the question. So, you know, absolutely. But I also want to really emphasize here that the men experiencing homelessness who will be sheltered at this site, right, came from communities, and they are going to move back into permanent housing in communities, and we want them to remain connected to a community. So while it is really important that, as Diane and others talked about, that there is a good neighbor policy and adequate security and other kinds of things, we want people to, while they are experiencing homelessness and while they're getting their back on their feet, to be connected to a community. So, you know, looking for sites that do straddle residential neighborhoods and is really important. When we are in a residential neighborhood, there in certain cases there's restrictions on who can be in the site, and we will follow those. But you know, so this is we see this as being part of the community and not separate. So I'm going to stop, and Diana, if you want to pick up from there.
So I think, but just to clarify, I think, you know, Hazel is particularly concerned about the placement next to, you know, it's within 1,000 feet or less than 1,000 feet from Icahn Charter School, which has up to 1,000 students. It's a very congested area. Having been a district manager going on 10 years, I unfortunately I've had to deal with a lot of congestion issues for that area. So I don't know, you know, why maybe specifically this site in this congested area, if that was answered or addressed.
And in, you know, New York City has a excuse me, tight real estate market. I don't have to tell that to anybody. So we look for sites that are developable, that can work for shelter. And this was a site that was brought to us. Neither the city nor Lantern went out and self-identified it, but you know, we are looking for sites where we can develop. In New York City, we have to be a little bit, you know, we have to be flexible. We have to look at different options. You know, it is a real estate market that we have to work with what's there.
Okay. Yeah, I have a question for you. Speaking of site location, right? I'm an architect, trained architect over the years. And as you heard, some of the concerns about location is a big concern for people. Concern about it being near or close to or proximity to an icon charter school, a UCP, daycare center, and all those other entities, right? So that's a big concern. The other concern is parking, right? You have to have your staff go there to work, and it's a very congested area. So all of those things you have to take into consideration. As an architect, I'm looking at zoning. I'm looking at the choice of what you're doing. So when I'm looking at your, I don't know if you see it here. I have a map of where you're locating it. You have it in a and I'm just trying to help out because I understand the need for services. My sister was once homeless, so I understand the need for it. I do. And you're building a men's shelter, correct? It's all male shelter. It's not a family shelter. It's not a women's shelter. All male. So there's concern. There's a big concern about that. There is. There always is a concern when you have that factor. It's a human issue. It's a human thought. So we have to address those issues. But you're zoned in an R6A and an M1-2.
Yep.
Right. So you're overlapping between manufacturing and residential. Right. Correct. And I'm looking at the architect's filing. So he has information in here to me that's misleading. I don't know if you look at it. He has the lot area of 21,000 square feet. That combines both the manufacturing and the residential. But he's only building in the residential, right? So the FAR, he's also building in the manufacturing area too?
Yes, yes. So the way the site is predominantly was developed with those two issues in mind, and it is a slightly tricky site.
Yeah, but
let me just.
He has a frontage of 122, and the address is Stillwell, right? 122 feet is not. It's on Bassett. It's not on Stillwell. But the frontage of the building is on Stillwell, not on Bassett. And the FAR for the M1-1 is 1, and the FAR for the residential is 3, right? So both require parking. There's a lot of issues here that it's not making me, or I don't think it's going to make the community feel very comfortable about how he's going to address issues that are very concerning. And as an architect, how is he going to build that building on just that residential area? Because the FAR that's required for the residential is different from what's required on your manufacturing. Right. And it's not very clear. I know you'll probably explain it to me, and that's why it was probably rejected, because it's not very clear on his filing, right? Okay. And you can't even have parking in the front on the map in an R6A. And on the map, it shows two or three parking spaces, I think, on the front facade, the front face of the building, which is on Stillwell, not on Bassett.
Okay. I studied architecture, but it's all pretty. I'm not licensed, and I don't have anything like your qualifications. So let me just answer what I know, which is not going to be a registered architect's response. but we've been talking to the architect. He's been very responsive to some of our concerns. So the first thing is, as I understand it, I'm gonna start with this. Whatever happens at that building will have to pass building department muster,
Right.
zoning and design. So if you're telling us this has been not accepted, that means it's back to the drawing board to have some certain kinds of tweaks. The concept, though, was that the Stillwell Avenue side, which has that frontage, will be a residence, and the residential component will be concentrated along the Stillwell Avenue frontage. When you get to where the former auto shop is, the Bassett Avenue side, that's where the FAR steps down to a one-story building, and that's where most of the programmatic amenities from social service, recreation and dining, medical suite, kitchen, that's all along that side. I'm not an examiner and I'm not the architect, but I do know the architect was taking both of those things into consideration, and I also know enough to know that there can be back and forth.
Right, but you're having.
Let me just answer. I think the second thing that I heard you say, and that was about parking. And I do think parking is a legitimate concern, not just for the community, but also for us. We'd love to have more parking. And I think, if anything, based on what my experience with interacting, the parking is the biggest, not fully resolved item, just in terms of design, zoning, location, amenities. So and then what we'll do is we'll take this back, and I will certainly, I don't have to really take it back. The architect will have to talk to the developer if there are things that the building code and building department won't allow.
Right.
Just to clarify, Oral, hold on, I'm sorry. So they were invited, right? The developer and the architect?
You know what? We heard about this late Friday afternoon. It was like, I had no idea that that their presence was wanted at this particular meeting. I thought it was much more of an introductory. So they were invited, but they are not able to make it.
Okay. All right.
So one of the things I mentioned on Friday is I didn't want to walk away from this meeting with questions to be answered later on. I had asked that everybody that had anything to do with this production was at this meeting tonight, so we can get all our answers. And already, with first question, and we're already saying, well, we'll let you know. We'll get back to you. That's exactly what I didn't want to happen, and I made that very clear on Friday.
But I can't, Angelo, I can't, it was short notice for us. I can't reasonably expect someone to show up and they have less than, I just don't, I can't. And, because anyone would want, I'm sorry, Angelo, I'm going to be really straightforward. Anyone would want to walk into the situation, feel prepared. And I cannot say whether it was an absolute or whatever, but they're just not available. And they were not invited until Friday afternoon.
Right.
I didn't know to invite them. I did not know. If I had known, maybe there would be another conversation. I don't know, and I also, from at least my prior experience, I just haven't walked into a room with the developer being there. So I don't know, DHS can be more.
Yeah, and just to be very clear, the city has a contract, we'll have a contract with Lantern. Lantern is leasing the space. The city parties who are here and speaking to it. The developer is the landlord, and they have a very limited role.
Okay, so we still have a lot of questions unanswered.
Well,
right?
It's fine that you broached them.
And the other issue is the programmatic development of a 200-bed facility on the residential portion of the building, right? You're going to put all the amenities, whatever, the kitchen, what other common spaces on the manufacturing portion of the site. That's what you're telling me, right? That's the idea. And then you're going to have a 200-bed unit on the residential portion.
That's the broad concept.
If you look at it, if you look at the design and look at the requirements, I know you probably won't be able to answer some of this stuff.
But
the zoning setbacks, the rear yard requirements for both sides on there, which are not
Mhm.
clearly indicated on the plot plan. I don't have the layout of the site to me, but a 200-bed unit on a lot, the residential side is it turns into a slimmer, a lot skinnier lot size.
Mhm.
So now you're adding rooms that are probably going to be smaller and tighter. I'm not sure of the layout. And you would prefer, if you wanted to have a quality housing, right? You would think you would have more amenities, even in the sleeping areas. You would have bigger spaces or whatever, larger
Mhm.
windows that can see views or whatever for people who are living there. But on the site, I don't see that. I can't see how you're going to fit a 200-bed unit now on a site that's less than half the size of the manufacturing site. So all those questions are very concerning to me. All of those things are very concerning I think it's concerning to the community, that you're going to build a building there. What is it going to look like? And does this site, to me, it doesn't make sense to even have that site. And it's also 6 stories. It's going to be it's going to stick out versus all the other buildings in the neighborhood. You may have other luxury apartments around there, but what's this going to look like, this 6-story building? Now you're going up the same size as the other apartment building. So you're making it now to begin to look like apartment buildings, projects. I mean, I don't think that if you want to make a community building or a site for residents that want to try to get back on their feet, want to feel more comfortable in an area, not to look like projects. And I'm hoping it doesn't look like that, because to me, that's only going to be another sore thumb. The look of it, a 6-story building on a skinny site, which are typically projects to me, that's how they're built, makes any sense on the site. And until we really understand what this building looks like, so far the site doesn't make sense to me. As an architect and as a designer, I've designed buildings before. And my concern is how it fits on the site and how the zoning is going to apply to the building, what accommodations are going to fit into the manufacturing side of it, what's allowed over there. You're saying it's manufacturing, right? So you have a kitchen or whatever amenities you'll have on that site. Is that conducive to a manufacturing site? I don't know. And I don't know what's on there. So it doesn't right now it's not making sense to me. That particular site doesn't make sense to what you want to accommodate to me. I wouldn't recommend that site. Looking at it right now.
Can I jump in and give just kind of a basic overview of single adult DHS shelters? That this is not necessarily specific to this site, but I think it does answer some of these questions. The typical arrangement for a single adult shelter in the DHS system is dorm style accommodations, right? So people will be
and how many stories? How many stories typically?
It ranges considerably.
6 stories? I haven't seen a dorm.
Oh yeah, I have.
Oh, yeah.
How many are 6 stories? A lot or not that many?
Oh,
I don't have the exact data at my fingertips, but we absolutely, because we're building in developers in very dense neighborhoods.
Yeah.
We're in
And those
Manhattan
fail.
and other places.
Those
right?
fail. That's you're making your point. Those are not conducive to. It's a projects. You turn into a 6-story project building.
So
it's not.
Virtually all of the DHS shelters have dorm style accommodations for the single adults that live there, right? So it is 6, 8, 10 people sharing a room with a shared bathroom. There's a cafeteria style setting, right?
That's an SRO then, right?
No, SRO is usually a single room and possibly a shared bathroom.
It's an SRO. You're describing an SRO.
But no, it's more dorm. It's more of a dorm style.
Right. So there is one room with, and I'm sorry, I don't have the specifics on it, and the team can chime in, but 6, 8 people in a single sleeping room with a shared bathroom, and there's a cafeteria. So it is actually substantively different than an SRO. And then, but also I think just to level set, there is longstanding precedent that single adult shelters can be in M1 districts, right? So while we are distinguishing here between the different uses on the different parts of the sites, we have shelters where the entire building is in an M1 zone, and that is absolutely passes muster with the Department of Buildings. So I think some of the distinction about how the site is being used is a little bit of a red herring. You know, absolutely there is opportunity to think about design. We want to blend into the neighborhood. Want to, you know, part of being a good neighbor is being physically a good neighbor as well as the people who are there. So again, I will let those who know the can speak to the specifics of the design chime in, but I did want to level set about what DHS shelter in general looks like.
Right. And
How many 6-story shelters do you have outside of Manhattan?
I don't have that at my fingertips.
I'm guessing very few, if any.
But we are in many very dense neighborhoods, so I actually think it's probably a fairly large number.
With a 6-story shelter?
Mhm.
Outside of
Well,
Manhattan?
I don't, you know, I have absolutely no idea about the data, but part of my wait a minute, let me just finish, okay? I have absolutely no idea about the specific shelter data, but I do know that I was in affordable housing development for a long time, since the late 90s, early 90s.
Affordable housing.
And generally, I'm not talking about the specifics. Generally, people will develop to the available FAR and to the available buildings. So depending on, it's not so much about whether it's in Manhattan, it's really about what the FAR, the density and the code allows for a specific type of housing. And I've dealt with developers for a very long time, profit and not for profit. And that is exactly what they do. And they're architects, they work within what's available and allowable. And they try to max that out. And then if they're good architects and good owners, they really try to do that in a way that is as maximally respectful to the context and to the community in which they decided. But it's really not about Manhattan versus Brooklyn or Bronx. Brooklyn's a little lower density, but both Bronx and Manhattan are high density communities.
So I want to make sure everybody gets a question. I think Ken Gelnick was next on my list that I was able to see. Ken, are you in the meeting?
Unmute and turn on.
There you go, Ken. You're on.
Good evening, everybody. I actually have a few questions for the city. Number one, actually, well, let's stick with Lantern because we're there now. I heard something before that DHS said something that the developer brought the site to them. How did you get to this site? Okay, how did you come to find this site and to want to develop it?
So the city has
that was addressed to land. I thought.
Oh,
sorry.
Okay, to a Lantern.
Ms. Park, I'll get if you.
Okay. I'm sorry. I thought that was addressed to Molly, to Ms. Park.
Well, let me ask you this. Let me ask both of you. Who was the originator of the site? How did the site come to the attention of either the city or Lantern? Ms. Park, you want to answer that first?
Sure. The owners of the site and the developers brought it to the attention of the city.
Do you know of a timeline on that?
I think it was about a year ago, but I have to check the exact date.
Would you be able to get back to us? Yes?
Sorry, I muted myself. Yes, certainly.
Okay. Then I'm sorry, Ms. Leonard. I forgot the name. I'm terrible.
Diane, you're muted.
I'm sorry.
Diane?
Just say Diane. My last name is Luard Michel, all right? It's
Luard Michel. Mr. Luard Michel. When did you start getting, when did your Lantern Community Services start getting involved with this site?
So, I probably should have done a direct check. It's been about 4 to 5 months when we were first approached. I'll just say that, this is part of our mission, so we do serve homeless people. It was known that we would like to expand. I was approached by the city to say, would you have any interest in doing another shelter? And I said, yes. It turned out it's with somebody that I know, a friend of a friend, and I knew them to be, at least I had heard that they were honorable and upfront. And so I said, tell me some more. And that was the beginning. That was the beginning. It's about 5 months ago.
I'm sorry, my friend. And who was, you said you was approached by some friend of a friend that you were on, who are these people?
No, the city, they did not approach me. The city actually approached me. I just happened to know that the proposed developer, I was actually someone who's been out there in the development community. So I recognize the name, yes.
What was the name, if you could tell us?
I leave that to DHS. How do you feel about that, DHS?
Yeah, the developers are, I think, immaterial to this conversation. The contract that will occur is between the city and Lantern.
Ms. Park, we are interested. Why do you think this seems to be against the de Blasio's administration's openness idea? Why are you all of a sudden getting defensive about it?
I'm not defensive. I'd like to keep the focus on what the city and Lantern, who are the ones who are directly engaged in this, in the project, in the community, and who are answerable to the city.
I understand it, but just, it seems that the minute somebody brought it up, you turned it off. Would you be able to get us the names of the people later on?
I think Lantern and the City of New York, the Department of Homeless Services, are the entities who are responsible for the site and who are responsible to the community and need to be responsive to the community. And we are here and we are happy to answer questions about how the shelter is going to operate.
You've just repeated, you didn't answer the question. Okay, that's fine.
So Ken, I just want to,
I'm sorry.
I was just going to say that,
please.
I was just going to say, I'm going to be me no matter what. I don't change for a committee board meeting. I don't change for city hall meeting. I am who I am. Basically, you can be assured that I will take ownership and responsibility for the things over which I have control and I have ownership. So for me, that means that I am trying to come into your community, make it our community, with something that is obviously we all know is a urgent city need, but we also all know that it has to be done the best possible way with open doors of communication. So I may not be always able to give exactly the answer that would be preferable, but I will work honestly, openly, and I will take responsibility for the things that will ultimately fall to us, which is to run the very best shelter we can, provide the very best service we can to the clients, and also be the best neighbors that we can. And I'm taking down notes about the concerns about the facility design and parking, because I feel that that's something that we should be going back and thinking about how we can possibly do it better. We have actually put a lot of thought. And I will say, I would just be honest, when we first heard about like concentrating the residents on one side and the stuff and the sort of the programmatic on the other side, it wasn't intuitive to us, but throughout the design process, we've seen some merits and some benefits to that. To the question about, it being a project, we are going to do everything we can in terms of design. I think good design and good fenestration and good design so that it does not look like, it doesn't stick out and look institutional. So we're going to do everything that we can within our power with the budget, and time constraints to make this not an eyesore and make this not an intrusion.
Well, based on what I'm saying, go ahead.
So two things. First of all, the first thing was the question was about the developer, who the developer is. Was that Ken? Was that your question?
Yes, that was my.
Yeah, I
That's
mean,
respect.
I don't know what they told us on Friday it was Rabinowitz. I mean, I don't know what the big deal is for that. One,
Mhm.
two, you know, I some like, you know, some, is this the right site? You know what? That's what
Mhm.
like a board member asked me. Like, is this the right site? Is because I
Mhm.
know the city was interested in finding alternate sites. I mean, I know the council member was interested in alternate sites. I mean, working with you guys, I don't know. I mean, again, there's a lot of concerns with the school. And then with COVID and the budgetary crisis, I know a board member asked me about that, if this is realistic at this point.
Uh-huh.
You know, somebody in the chat asked about when construction is looked to be through. I thought it was the end of 2021, but with everything that's going on, I really don't see how that would happen.
So if I could jump in on a couple of things. From a city budget perspective, yes, the city is in an incredibly challenged budget perspective, but we are also legally obligated to provide shelter to those who require it. So the alternative to to sites run by strong providers like Lantern is commercial hotels, and that is not useful. That is not good for clients. It's not good for communities either. So we are really trying to stay, you know, other than many people have read, we're in a lot of COVID hotels during the period of COVID, but as a statement of policy, the city is exiting the use of commercial hotels as shelter. We are legally obligated to provide that shelter, so we are going to continue to add shelter capacity. So despite the challenging budget situation, yes, we are going to continue to add shelter as needed in the city of New York. I think I got slightly derailed there. What was the other part of your question?
I mean, is this a fixed site? I think you know some
Is
of
the
the
right site?
Yeah, right. Sorry.
I'm concerned about
Every
the site.
year, the commissioner's office sends a letter to council members and to community boards asking for sites, asking for proposals for sites, because the reality is we have to house people who are experiencing homelessness. This goes to every community board, every council member every year. And honestly, we very rarely get responses. When we have gotten responses, when communities have suggested sites, we are more than happy to work with them. But it has clearly, we can't do only the sites that communities suggest because it just simply isn't enough. We do have a legal obligation to house those who are experiencing homelessness.
So Al had his hand up, just so everybody's clear, because a lot of people are bothering me or reaching out to me about who was next. In the order I saw, it was Al, Yahe, Janice, Frano for board members. It looks like Naomi got her question asked. Al, did you have any questions?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Al D'Angelo, it's Mark Jonai, counsel. Because Jeremy brought me into the mix, and I had a question for Molly Parks from DHS, if it's okay with you.
Go ahead, Mark.
He is just so everybody's aware, Councilmember Jonai is officially a board member. He's an ex officio board member.
Okay.
So I had plenty of questions, but you brought me into when it comes to the site planning. And thank you for agreeing to be here. I wish the architect and the developer were here. They could answer a lot of questions. They should have been here. And if we're going to have an open conversation, and Diane, I know of you, I don't know you, and I know of Lantern, I don't know the group that's here today. But if you gave information on Friday where you told the community board that Daniel Rabinowitz was the owner and developer, why is it such a secret today? It kind of leaves me to, where's the transparency? So either we're going to have a conversation here and we're all going to share our thoughts and answer the questions honestly and truthfully, or we're not. Now, I'm going to go back to Molly, where the comment about a fiscal concerns that we have. I'm looking at some rough numbers here, and I know a little bit about development and ownership. 4.8 million, plus an average of $325 to $350 a square foot buildable. You're looking with soft cards, and we're looking at $17 million for this shelter. Is that accurate? Maybe even higher.
Sorry, I don't have the development budget in front of me, but I can tell you that it is substantially less expensive to house people experiencing homelessness in shelters that are contracted the way that we are moving forward with this one than it is to house people in commercial hotels.
That wasn't the question.
I understand that it isn't the question. I don't have the direct answer to the question in front of me because I don't have the development budget in front of me. But if we are talking about the fiscal merits of the site, we must provide shelter, right? And the choice really.
Yeah, but not answering the questions. We can't waste time giving additional information. Just answer the question.
So sorry, Molly, I apologize for that interruption. So if you can, Ms. Park, can you continue with that explanation? And I'm going to make it like a dentist, that I'm going to pry the information out of you because the information is relevant. But go ahead, Ms. Park.
I am telling you very much the truth when I say I do not have the development budget in front of me.
Okay.
We'd be happy to circle back with more detail about the.
Here's what we know. 4.8 million is the price. This we all know. That was the price of the purchase of the property. 30,000 square feet, the average at $325, which is on the low end.
Well,
these are numbers that we know.
if I could chime in
very low end, Mark. Very low end.
Shelter is generally less expensive than housing because you are not putting in a kitchen and a bathroom for every individual unit. So,
great.
Right. So it is. There are real development costs associated with this project. I certainly can't pretend that there aren't. I don't have them in front of me because, and I'm sorry I don't have them in front of me, but we can get back to you with more detail about the development budget. But again, there is no do nothing option here.
I'm with you.
The individuals who are going to be who come into the DHS system must be sheltered somewhere, right? And they either go into shelters that have that are designed for the purpose, that are contracted, long-term contracts with reputable not-for-profits like Lantern, or they go into commercial hotels. And commercial hotels is both a less desirable way of serving clients and substantially more expensive.
Thank you
from
for
a
that,
fiscal perspective, this is a better option.
Thank you for that, Ms. Park. So I'll continue my question to you. Because we're going around about default answers. I don't know why you would attend the meeting on a site and not have numbers with you. I mean, that's done intentionally. You knew this meeting was going to happen. You knew the numbers. It wouldn't take you very long to get them if you didn't know them. So in all honesty and transparency, you're not here to answer questions. You're here to waste the next hour skirting around. When you say that this is cheaper, I am about taxpayer dollars. Let's save some taxpayer dollars. If I gave you an alternative site at a lower price that could accommodate the same square footage that you need, would you accept it as an alternative to this project in the same community board?
We'd be more than happy to look at that, yes.
Ready to go. So you're going on the record, if I bring a site, or the community board brings a site ready to go, to have Lantern sign the deal, because apparently Lantern allegedly is negotiating with you, but yet you brought the deal to Lantern, which means it's really the developer that's doing it, but we'll leave that aside. If we bring you a site that can accommodate your needs at a greatly reduced price from acquisition, would you consider it as an alternative to this site?
I am happy to look at it. I'm
Beautiful.
not going to make a commitment as to yes, no, because I don't have the details, but we would be happy to take a look at it.
So then the question, Diane, to you, straightforward. And maybe I don't understand the process, but you made a comment that you said the city brought this deal to you. I thought on the RFPs, you bring the deals to the city.
It can go, let me be, at least from my experience, which is 2 shelters, right? Shelter development and location can come either from the not-for-profit provider, who sometimes actually develops the site, develops the site, and goes forward. The history in the city of New York, though, is that that's relatively major development. It sometimes can be somewhat speculative, and the city has relied on private developers to identify and finance and use equity to build out the sites. Now, what that means is that someone like me, and I'll be honest, I just don't have the wherewithal. We're not developers, right? So I don't have the wherewithal. Some agencies do, some agencies don't. I don't have the wherewithal to go out and develop, identify, nor is it my mission. My mission is to operate and provide services. That's what we do. That's my sweet spot. That's what I do well. So right now, the way it's in my particular case, at least in our 2 other shelters, sometimes the developers call me up and said, would you do something with us? Sometimes it's the city, but the city and the developer always collaborate. It's never something that's done willy-nilly. The city, does need to find sites, and homeless people need to be served. And so it's sort of an identity of a lot of different interests. It's no one set way, but the goal is to try to find, try to shelter homeless people.
Thank you for that, Diane. But who negotiated this deal then? Is it you? Who determined the rent that's going to be paid yearly? Is it
Not
you?
me.
No.
Not me.
So you have no idea about the rent
I'll be,
that's gonna be paid.
we do get a number, but I'm not part of that negotiation. When I sit in the driver's seat, I will let you know. I am part of the negotiation about what the operating budget would be needed to manage this shelter well. I'm part of the negotiations as to what kind of startup expenses might be needed, but because it's not my money at risk, it's someone else's money at risk, there is a sort of a parallel negotiation. And then if it all comes together, we move forward. But
Thank you for that. Thank you for that.
That's my experience, though. That may not be everyone's experience.
And thank you for that honesty. Then just for transparency, I'm going to say that you're here as the provider only, the manager.
The manager, provider, right.
But the rent gets paid to you, you get paid, and you pay the developer, the owner, correct? Isn't that? So you become like the pastor. Okay.
Basically.
So then I'm going to, would you be shocked that this is going to probably be based on my numbers? About $3 million a year passing through Lantern for this site.
For the developer?
You are.
No, I just want to know what are you asking me about?
Based on my projections and the information that I have, since you are the manager of this site, you will be paying the developer, the landlord, a fee for his development and property. I'm guessing in the neighborhood of about $3 million a year will come from DHS to you for this facility. Is that about right?
Council member, I want to jump in again and go back to the point that
Ms. Park, I can come back to you and I'm going to negotiate with you or with Diane, and she's the manager. She's the one that's negotiating. She said she was approached. She said, all I am is here trying to manage this facility. If you want to talk to me, I'm happy to talk to you, but let Diane answer the question, please.
Okay. So what I'm going to say to you is I tend to my knitting and my expertise. My expertise is in shelter operations. I was not privy to, nor do I determine the landlord's compensation. I would assume that compensation has to do somewhat with cost to acquire, cost to build, and a profit margin. And that's where I'm going to leave it because, to be honest, that's not my material concern. That's not where I have impact. I have impact over, can I operate this in the best interest in a stable, clear, safe way? And do I have those resources? Outside of that, it's kind of pass through.
Right. Thank you for the honesty that we all now understand it's a pass through. You wouldn't be surprised, but where are you when it comes to the RFP? Have you what stage are you at this RFP? Have you finalized your deal? Or you're still negotiating?
The RFP has been rated and we've been deemed an acceptable provider.
Okay.
In my experience, sometimes program
that's-
costs are somewhat tweaked as we go around. We haven't done any bids, we haven't done any of that, so.
So you
yeah.
haven't received an intent to award letter yet? You're just approved at this point?
We've been approved.
But you
Exactly.
did not receive the intent to award letter. You're still
I
negotiating.
have not received a letter that says it is our intent to award this project. I received a
Very
letter
good.
saying,
So we still have time then to
Rated.
work out, we still have time to work something out. And I'm grateful to you for that honest answer, Diane.
and I gotta tell you, Councilman, last time I looked at my email, it was like middle afternoon. The way things are happening, I could have something else in my box. I should
Well,
possibly look. But
Hey,
Molly could tell maybe a little bit more about where the city is and what the meanings of that are. But, definitely we are committed,
and right.
but we're committed to doing the best job we
Thank you,
possibly.
Diane. So Diane, how many single men shelters do you operate?
We operate one single men's shelter and one single woman's shelter. We do
How many
special
men?
single adults.
How many men in that shelter?
It's 113 men in the men's shelter and 81 women in the women's shelter.
Okay, so but when it comes to men, because this is a special shelter specifically being built and managed for men, so this is about 100% increase on the existing shelter that you have. Thank you for that. We just want to get an understanding of
exactly.
your background and what you're doing. Okay, great.
So let me just say one other thing, since we're having a dialogue. So that's our agency experience. The people who actually run and operate shelters within the agency, whether it's at the administrative level, at the director level, they also have experience. Amy has had experience running other shelters. We have a VP of shelter who's run large men's shelters, significantly large men's shelters. They would not be necessarily the direct person, but they do have the experience to help both inform the development and those nuances that are going to go on back and forth, out of respect for the community, out of respect for our clients. We do bring that expertise. So it's not, I always say it's not just about me. I'm an executive director. I don't have to be a sector expert in everything. I bring and assemble the people who can inform, hopefully, to the best outcomes. So it's not just about me or Amy. We do have other people within the agency with yes, experience running 200-bed men's shelters.
Thank you, Diane. So Molly, Ms. Park, if it's okay, now I can ask you the question that you wanted to answer before, and it's about Daniel Rabinowitz and the number of shelters that he's been awarded, and how he's able to negotiate with you, pre-negotiate, and pay exorbitant prices for land that is completely out of the market range, knowing that there's an inside deal with this administration. My understanding is of the 90 shelters, he may have as many as 15. That's 17%. Now, maybe I'm wrong here, but either a part owner or directly involved with. And to pay $4.8 million for a piece of property that's worth half that on a good day, that's at the height of the real estate market, is concerning to me, to you, and everyone that pays taxes to the city of New York, and how wisely we spend that money. So if Daniel Rabinowitz has an in with this administration where he can secure deals by overpaying exorbitant amount of money for a property that's not worth it, I'd like to know how that's possible during this budget crisis.
So I actually take umbrage with the idea that you're suggesting that we would be doing anything inappropriate.
God forbid.
We all work here very hard to make sure that we are providing high quality, good shelters for people who need to get back on their feet. So, I want to really push back on the idea that there is anything wrong going on here. That is very problematic to me.
Right. $5 million for a piece of property that's worth less than $2 million is not a problem. Nope, it's not your money, but go ahead.
Never mind.
Thank you. Molly, we are facing a tremendous budget deficit. Programs are going to be cut, services are going to be cut. This is the time when we're supposed to be really tight on how we spend taxpayer dollars. Overpaying for a piece of property because Daniel Rabinowitz is a friend of this administration.
Again, I really find that offensive.
Really? So how many deals does Danny Rabinowitz have this month going on? You're going to say, I don't know.
For every site that is brought to us, we do feasibility analysis for the site. We are looking at comps. It goes through multiple levels of review, not just at the agency, but also at the Office of Management and Budget and at City Hall. There is a quite extensive review before any site goes forward, right? And I cannot stress enough that the distinction that the choice that we are making, do nothing, cut shelter, is not an option. We must legally provide the shelter, right? This is a better option and a less expensive option than the alternative of putting people in commercial hotels. I can tell you, we look at dozens of sites every day. We reject many of them because they are inappropriate. We reject them because they are too expensive. When we have a site that can move forward, we try to make that work. But I really resent the implication that the men and women at DHS who work incredibly hard to serve the most needy households and needy individuals in the city of New York are doing anything wrong.
15% of the developments go to one developer, and it just so happened that he made a large donation to this mayor. That's not striking. You said you do background search and appraisals, so if we showed you appraisals that showed this property is overvalued, you would clearly walk away from it then. Or if I gave you an alternative site that's going to be much cheaper, you would gladly embrace it. Or does it have to be Daniel Rabinowitz that brings you the deal?
Councilman, I have already said that we would be happy to review another site.
Great.
And I have also said that we reach out to your office every year to ask for site suggestions, and we have never received one.
And I just want to remind everyone that in these contracts, there's an out clause. And the next mayor, because this building won't be built by 2021, the next mayor will have that option to opt out of a contract that is milking taxpayer dollars and using them at a time when we're supposed to be good stewards. And I'm going to pray that the next mayor undoes this deal if it goes through. And I'm going to call out this administration and DHS if I show comparable properties that can accommodate the structure that you need for a cheaper price, a much lower price, is not taken as an alternative. That in itself is a punishable criminal, is what it is. It's criminal. And the last point I want to make, and I'm done for the night because I'm just so upset and heated by this, is you claimed earlier that we try to place homeless in the communities that they live in. Are these 200 men in this community, live in this community? And I don't mean because they were Jacobi Hospital that they have an address of Jacobi or any other health clinic, as well as a mile away is another 200 proposed, and I'm not sure what that is, men's shelter. That would be 400 single men in Community Board 11. Are you telling me that all 400 men come from the Community Board 11? Or are we bringing them from other parts of the city?
We prioritize people from the local community. What being from a local community means can be kind of complicated for people who've had for people who've had a lot of turmoil in their lives, right? They may have lived in the neighborhood and then spent, a year couch surfing. They may have, people come to shelter from a lot of different paths. And also we prioritize people with other kinds of connections to the community. It could be that they worship at a faith-based institution. It could be that they have a job near and in the community. There are a variety of different ways that we do it. But yes, we are prioritizing people who have a connection to the community.
But your misleading statement about making it sound like they come from this community because they went to Orchard Beach and they went there during the summer doesn't mean they come from this community. Because they took a bus through this community doesn't mean they come from this community. And the definition you just used, whether it be church or whether it may be some at one point in their life, they could have had a residence there, they could have lived there with a neighbor, a roommate, doesn't qualify as a resident of the community.
Councilmember, I said nothing about going to Orchard Beach or taking a bus through the community, and I don't appreciate having my words misrepresented. There are close to 700 people in the DHS shelter system right now who are from the community board. That is a number that changes on a regular basis, but there are absolutely people from the community who are experiencing homelessness.
I'm sure there are, and my heart goes out, and I want to do right by them, and I don't want to warehouse them, and I want to make sure that they get to live in communities that they are familiar with. But 400 single men in Community Board 11, that would be more than half of the total homeless, according to your numbers, are not from this community. You don't
That's
get
a
it.
problem.
That's a big problem. And Community Board 11 should be more vocal about this. And you're going to say, we can't tell you who the 790 homeless people are because you can't provide information on someone, and we'll never know the answer, but somebody knows the answer. And I can tell you that it's not from Community Board 11. 400 single men are coming in from outside of this borough, let alone within this borough.
We prioritize people from the community. We prioritize people from the Bronx.
Okay.
There are close to 700 people experiencing homelessness from Community Board 11 in the shelter system right now. I've said my piece.
Yeah. And I guess, Oral, when you find the objections that I requested from the Department of Buildings as to the objections that have not been made public as of yet, I'd like to know that as well. There's certainly a concern there about how they put in for one permit on this when it's a new development and it far exceeds the value of the existing structure. We'll be keeping an eye on that and working with the building department to make sure that every I is dotted, every T is crossed. We're going to need your expertise on that.
Okay.
And I'll come back to the rest of the questions later. I'm going to thank everybody for allowing me to speak.
So, thank you, Mark. Al, you had a question earlier? I don't know if you still have a question.
No, I'm good.
All right, Yahe, I don't know if you have a question. I think it might have been already addressed. You still there?
You may be muted. Yahe?
I know he had.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm back in. Yeah, I got automatically kicked out. I don't know why. So you're saying the right things, and it sounds like you're trying to sell it to us, and you've been trained to say these things. When you say you want to be a good neighbor, blend into the neighborhood, it doesn't seem like you're blending in. If you're coming into a residential neighborhood that's near a school and you want to build a single men shelter, it doesn't sound you're trying to blend in. We haven't seen the other sites that you would have showed us that you're trying to build on or develop on. So we'd like to see those sites that you looked at. And lastly, we already, like the councilman said, we already have a 200 single men shelter. Now we're adding another 200 single men shelter. Wouldn't you want to rethink that?
Sorry, mute issues. No, there are very real needs for sheltering New Yorkers. There are very real needs for sheltering
Yeah, but you have to think of the needs of the residents in the neighborhood too. And you have to think of that also. So if you wanted to consider another site versus another men's shelter, maybe you should consider that too. At least you understand the concerns of the community. I think it's reasonable to say yes, we can consider adding another men's shelter to the Bronx. I mean, there's nothing wrong with saying that, because if there's another site.
And as I said to the council member, I would be, if there's another site in the district that you would like us to take a look at, we would be more than happy to take a look at that.
But you're trying to be a good neighbor. I'd like you to tell us what sites you're also looking at other than this one, since you're getting all this community pushback. And earlier someone said that you're looking, New York, tough real estate market. If you can find something, you grab it. It sounds like that's what happened here. So real estate market was priority over the neighborhood. Is that what happened here?
I'd like to actually really challenge the notion that people experiencing homelessness can't be good neighbors and can't be integrated into the fabric of the community, right? These are New Yorkers who hit hard times, who need to get back on their feet, and they came from neighborhoods, and they will be going back to neighborhoods, and we really believe that shelter can and should be part of the community and part of the fabric of that larger community while people are experiencing homelessness. And we have a lot of very successful examples of that across our system, and certainly Diane can talk about that in her personal experience as well. But the idea that this is somehow outside of community, I think, is one that I'd really like to challenge, because these are our fellow neighbors, our fellow New Yorkers that we are talking about, who are going to be sheltered here.
Now, I resent the fact that you make it sound like we're insensitive to homeless, because that's not the case. The case is, and you mentioned, you told the councilman, we take priority of those that live in the district first. Yes, you may take priority, so you'll take 5 that live in the district first and then take the rest from outside the district. I've done a number of group visits on group homes and other facilities that in our borough. And most of the people that come or in those facilities are not Bronx residents. They come from Brooklyn. They come from Manhattan. We have the highest number of homeless shelters than any other borough by per capita, than any other borough. Staten Island has 1. How do you explain that?
So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to come across as insulting. That was absolutely not my intent. This administration has made a very concerted effort to site shelters in every community district in the city. There are people experiencing homelessness from every community district in the city, and we feel very strongly that shelters should be distributed across the city in every single neighborhood. We at this point have shelters sited in all but 3. And we are working very hard to make sure that we reach those 3 additional community districts. So there are some community districts where the shelter hasn't opened yet, but as I say, we have sited in all but 3, and that is a top priority for me for the next year, to make sure that we have in fact distributed the shelters in every single neighborhood, because that really people experiencing homelessness come from every.
But it's every community's responsibility to take care of the homeless. They're homeless, not your homeless, our homeless. If we have homeless people in this community, it's intention upon us to take care of them. That's what we should do. It's the right thing to do. It's a Christian thing to do, but not when the borough is dumped on because the property values are lower than any other borough. And then when people pay a lot more money than a property is worth for a piece of property to put a homeless shelter in our community, when we have another shelter going up less than a half a mile away with another 200 bed.
Yeah, we have to think about that. Why is the Bronx have more homeless shelter per capita than any other borough? Can we look into that? I mean, is there a reason why? Molly, can you explain?
The property is the cheapest.
So why?
Well, I think some of that is a reflection of history. And one of the things that the city has been doing over the last several years is closing sites that don't meet the quality standards that we are looking for. So we have closed more than 200 sites in the last several years. We can get you data on how many of those have been in the Bronx, but I think we have so what we have been doing is closing the sites that don't meet the city standards and replacing them and opening new ones with sites that are spread across the city. As I said, we have shelters sited in all but 3 community boards right now, and are working on that.
And what does the data look like for our community? How many homeless men do we have?
It's about 700 people in total. That the numbers are very much a moving target, right? Because it is a fluid population, so we don't break it down by community board with different populations.
But specifically, well, you have to do the research. I mean, I'm asking specifically, since this is a homeless shelter for men, how many homeless men do we have in our community to get 200 men in our community? That's my
As
question.
as I say, because the numbers do change, are very fluid, given the nature of the population, we don't break it down that way. I did want to just to add back onto a point that that I was talking about before. A colleague just sent me some information. In the first year of Turning the Tide, which is the city's shelter plan, it started in 2017, we closed 13 sites in CB11. So we actually, there are, this is part of a much larger initiative, right? Right now we're talking about a site that is opening, but we are also closing sites that don't meet our standards.
So Frano has been waiting a while. Can Frano ask? Frano had a question about asbestos and maybe something else. Frano?
Actually, yes, I have two questions. Number one, asbestos remediation on buildings that your department or have purchased or leased is number one. How many are there and what areas are they? Number two, you are definitely avoiding the question of how many residents are from the Bronx when you know the question, but you don't want to answer. You're a typical City Hall politician, unfortunately, and it's unfortunate for the community. So how many people are from Community Board 11 and specifically from the Bronx? If you don't know the answer, be specific, say no, but come back to us with the answer.
There are approximately 700, just under 700 people experiencing homelessness from CB11. I have the Bronx number somewhere in my email, but which I will dig out, or one of my colleagues will text it to me. What I don't have, because the numbers do fluctuate on a regular basis, so we do not produce the numbers this way, is how it breaks down across different population type. With respect to asbestos remediation across our system, that's a question I have not been asked before, and that is one that we'll have to follow up on. Certainly, the newer buildings the newer sites that we've opened as part of either the renovation process, we would absolutely do that as a matter of course. For some of the older sites, and particularly the city-owned buildings, because we do have a handful of shelters across our system that are in city-owned buildings, we have been doing asbestos remediation. I think the highest profile project there is at the 30th Street shelter in Manhattan.
Well, what about this particular site? Have there been any environmental assessments?
There will absolutely be a full environmental assessment that is done leading before the shelter is opened.
I had a follow-up question, please. And we're not against shelters, and hopefully you will take a look at the councilman's recommendation. But once the shelter is approved, what guarantee will there be that most, if not all, the residents will be from Community Board 11?
We prioritize the people who are from Community Board 11, but as I said, what it means to be from a particular area for somebody who has experienced homelessness, right, who may have had many stops on their journey that landed them in the shelter system, is not always a completely transparent thing, right? If you were living in CB11 and then spent a year on different people's couches, the data may not always be totally clear, but we absolutely prioritize first people from the community board and then people from the borough. I do have that data point that you asked for. There are 20,000 Bronx residents in the system, and over 4,000 of them are single adults.
Okay.
Hold on, Jeremy. Wait, Jeremy. Are these two sites going to be SARA compliant since they are shelters for men?
That is entirely dependent on the location, and there will be a formal analysis that is done on that. Oh, sorry, I'm getting that in. This is not a SARA compliant site.
Well, that's going to be a problem for me, especially because we have schools, we have daycare centers, we do have the UCP facility.
Yeah. Sorry,
With
just to
them-
clarify, being not a SARA compliant site means that anybody with residency restriction will not be placed in this site.
So,
Sure, okay, okay.
so no environmental studies have been done yet? No phase 1 or phase 2?
There will be a complete environment EAS done.
So, but it hasn't been done yet.
Correct.
Okay. And when it is done, will we get notice of that?
Yes, absolutely. It's published.
Okay. Veronica, you had a question?
Hi, yes. Hi, I'm the treasurer for CB11. I just had a quick question. Since there was an RFP completed, I'm sure you had to submit a budget. What was the rent line number?
A very direct question. Molly, is it? I don't like to tell anybody's business but my own. That's the developer's business. And so I'm a little reluctant to answer, but I'm sure, whatever DHS's protocol is around sharing that
Diane,
information.
please go ahead and answer that.
Okay, so at this point, and sometimes it is sometimes subject to a little variation, the number is 3.5 million. So that's the number that we've been told. It includes real estate taxes and other kinds of things, and that are included in that number.
That's the construction cost, right? That's just the
I'm talking about, yes, no, that's the rent. That's basically the rent.
That's a
which
year.
would then cover,
So,
of course, anything, I'm sure they negotiated so that they're not going to lose money on construction. So it does cover their acquisition and construction, a mortgage debt, plus some profit.
so I mean, I'm sorry to
That
say it.
doesn't
So what the council member said was correct, basically. I mean, didn't he say? I thought he said that. I thought it was crazy, but that's
No,
a year.
That's in keeping.
That's not that doesn't cover the construction cost, right? The 3 million? No.
No, it's.
So let me explain how the contracts work.
Sure.
Lantern will be leasing the site from the owner. The rent number is set that covers and is covering the landlord's costs. And when the rent is negotiated, it factors in the debt that the landlord is carrying to do the construction. So the Lantern is paying it as rent and the city is paying it as rent, right? But it is covering all of the landlord's costs associated with the property. So it's acquisition, construction, taxes, other costs like
development, equity.
Right. So we pay it as rent, but it is it encompasses the sum total of all of the costs of essentially procuring that property.
Was that negotiated or was it predetermined with DSS and the developer?
So Lantern was generally outside that negotiation. This was the city negotiating with the landlord. And I will say that it's early yet, as everybody has noted. This building is not yet in construction, so we lean high at this stage so that because it is very straightforward to go down, it is harder to go up. So that number is subject to change. But yes, it is. We negotiate out with the landlord, and as I mentioned, there's multiple levels of review. We are doing technical assessments to ensure that we agree with the construction costs. There are there's an Office of Management and Budget review, so it's definitely not just DHS on its own. There are multiple checks and balances there.
Okay. I think we should turn it over to the public at this point. No? I mean, it's really late. So,
Jeremy, I'd like to ask something if possible before we go to the public.
yeah, Maria? Was that you?
Yes, that was me. I'm from Assemblywoman Fernandez's office for the Lantern Group representatives. My question is for you guys, if you don't have the data, if you can please obtain it, that would be amazing. The first is approximately how much time does a person usually spend in a Lantern Group facility? And then also, if you have the percentage of people that successfully integrate as well into the neighborhoods.
So the first question is how long, do you mean in one of our shelters,
Yeah,
not in one of our housing facilities?
In one of your shelters.
I think that we think in general that people are there about 9 months, but of course the number varies really widely depending on the situation that people come in. Some people can move out very quickly. Some people, it's kind of a long road to finding stability and figuring out, what's the right setting for them to move to. I don't know that we have the specific number, but we usually think about a 9 months. And the second question was,
how is if there's a percentage of how many people that come into your shelters that you're able to successfully integrate into a neighborhood again?
Well, is that different? Do you mean integrate while they're living in the shelter? Because we do experience that. Or do you, while they're living in our shelter, or once they've moved out into more permanent housing?
I guess moving into more permanent housing, but the question could also apply while they're in the housing, like their ability to connect to the community, I guess, and build roots there. Like if there's a kind of like a percentage success rate of people who integrate into these communities.
Well, I don't have a percentage success rate, but I will say that our experience is that, what we said, or what I said earlier, those were not just words on the page. I mean, we really honestly believe that. And we have had great success in our very first shelter. Honestly, it was not a community that was very happy with our presence there in Queens. And we went through, quite a process of getting to know all the different organizations, the schools that were very concerned, that were very close by. And, we got to know our neighbors, the businesses, the organizations. And in some cases, some of the people living in the shelter were, they were looking for volunteer or, opportunities in the neighborhood. It's not, and employment in the neighborhood, it became a positive relationship. So I'm not saying it was always like that, but yes, we want to listen, we want to learn, we want to find out who's in the neighborhood and try to make it a positive. So I don't have any real statistics about that, but I think what you're really talking about is, like, we don't want people coming back into the system. What our goal is to give people the kinds of independent living skills and the kind of stability so that when they move into more permanent housing, that they're going to stay there. And, that's what we're always working for. I mean, as far as I know, for us, we haven't had anybody coming back to our shelter. They actually would come back if within a year of moving out, if they needed to come back into the system, they would come back into a Lantern shelter, but that hasn't happened so far for our 2 shelters. So maybe that's an answer to your question.
So just to clarify, Maria, you're asking about the placement rate, right?
Say that again?
You're asking about placement rate? Like what's the rate of placement?
Yeah.
Okay.
I would let, I do want Amy to jump in. But I will say that placement sometimes varies a little bit. It varies sometimes with time of year. It varies with staff. We could have, whatever, it varies with a lot of different factors. And so I don't think, and this is one of the things we are really working on, is kind to pull data from our 2 shelters and kind of think about them, singly and then in aggregate. But, in general, when we talk about placement or our placement, our task is to work with people where they are, to get them to a place where they can be ready to be housed. The housing situations vary a lot. The housing placements can vary by neighborhood, by level of independence, all of that. But the goal is to move people from homelessness to being housed. That's our goal. And we do that, and we are dealing with individuals. So like Amy said, some people it's really fast and they go to high levels of independence. Other people, it takes a little bit longer. But that's what we're going to do, because homelessness is just not, it's a state of being. It's not a permanent, it should not be a permanent definitional thing. We want people to be homeless and move beyond it. So that's what we're trying to do. We like I said, the city has some parameters and some goals, and we just try to hit our goals the best way we can. One of the things that we do is our housing coordinators and specialists do try to develop relationships with local landlords, as well as other kinds of, potential placement things. Some of them are great. Some of them do whatever, but that's the goal. So we have a lot of different techniques and tools for moving people along. But the actual numbers, that is not something I have.
Okay.
If I could just chime in a little bit with some system-wide context, the average length of stay for single adults citywide is definitely over a year, more like 15 months. So the fact that Lantern is able to move individuals out more quickly, I think, is really a testament to the strong work that they as providers are doing. Just again, sort of a citywide statistic, we place about 200 households in subsidized housing every week.
Great. So,
Well,
sorry,
I
Al.
think Amy was making an assessment, a judgment. I don't know if that was a actual number in the 9 months, right? So I don't know if that's is that an actual number, 9 months? Because it's typically longer than that.
Right.
Right.
So it wasn't, the 9 months was not like a definite issue, because I know, I can tell you, I know homeless, it's usually much longer than 9 months. On average, it's longer than 9 months.
And and like I said, I don't want to be, I think you're right. It can certainly be longer than 9 months. But we've had experience where it's been under 9 months. I don't know where the mean is. I don't know where the mean is. I just know that we've had some people moved out quickly. We have some housing coordinators who basically, 9 months is like, that's their goal. There are stars, though. There are stars, clearly. And some people and some clients do take longer. So I would not, please don't hold us to that number as our average length of stay. We're still collating, because we've been running shelter for, a year or so, 2 years now. And one of our programs is a little shorter than that.
Oh,
no,
okay,
that's what I wanted the public to know. I wanted the public to know that it's not nine months. I survey homeless shelters, and I know people who have been in there for years because they're still not able to get on their feet. And one of the biggest issues is also getting mental health for them too. So especially with, I'm not saying, but especially with men's shelters, you have to, there's a mental health component that needs to be addressed too.
Right. Well,
that's not, but I don't want to get into that.
I'm just saying, all that, it goes across gender as well. I think we have more men in shelter, but it definitely cuts across gender.
Agreed.
And that's why we try to be as comprehensive and holistic as we can, and addressing things that, but that's the thing. And I don't.
No, there's their family shelters. Their family shelters too.
Family shelters doesn't matter.
All right, so Al actually had one last thing, I guess, and then we really need to move over to the public. I mean, it's almost
again, I want to ask Molly a question. I did a little math. According to my mathematical calculations, we're paying $48 a day per bed just for rent. That's the highest I've ever heard of. That's without all the other costs, the management costs, and all the other fees that go into it. Is there any place else that costs that much money a day just for rent? This is just for bed space. This is not management fees or any other fees that go along with this. That's outrageous. Is that the highest?
Not at all.
It's,
Right. We are operating real estate in one of the really most challenging real estate markets in the city. We are making, and particularly because we are making sure that we are putting shelters in all different kinds of neighborhoods, that ultimately means that we are paying very real money in rent.
doesn't that seem exorbitantly high? That's just rent.
Listen, I come from an affordable housing background. If I would love to be in a place where we could be really putting up infinitely more affordable housing, and where we wouldn't be in a place where we're having this conversation. But where the city is right now, we need shelter, and better for worse, this is not an outlier.
That's not expensive? That's not one of the highest in the city?
No.
No?
No.
Well, just for a frame of reference, what is it possible? Molly, is that possible? A frame of reference? What is high? What is typical?
I mean, it varies very tremendously by neighborhood. But you know, I've certainly, and also at the point in time when the shelter was opened, right, an older shelter that had the rent number locked in, 8 years ago is going to have a very different kind of number than a site that is opening now. So there is a lot of variation, but as I say, for the sites that we are opening now, this is not unusual.
The real estate in the Bronx is the cheapest in any other borough, and yet we're paying $48 a bed in rent, just rent alone.
So I do want to caution that those numbers are not entirely final. So I think the order of magnitude is probably the right thing, but I also, given that we are recording and that we are on the record, I want to make sure that I'm very clear that these are not completely final numbers. Yes, that is the right order of magnitude, and that is not unusual.
Who doesn't negotiate?
All right.
This is insane.
Can we go on to the public at this point, Al, everybody else? And the order that I saw in the chat, I don't know about raised hands at this question. I saw Bob Press was first at 6:40 p.m. Bob?
Yeah, thank you, Jeremy. Just a couple of comments and questions. Mayor de Blasio and I have been going at it where he said that there is 37% of the homeless population in the Bronx, while the Bronx only has 18%. I am very familiar with turning the tides with him and DHS Commissioner. Okay, now, I just want to mention something about a contract with STAG in Community Board 8. They have a 5-year contract with a 4-year renewal. Now, this is going to be how long for the contract, how long for the renewal before the owner of the building takes it back? And will there be any more new buildings looked at to find in Community Board 11?
5-year contract with a 4-year renewal is our standard. It's very common across social service contracts. To the best of my knowledge, we are not looking at other sites right now in Community Board 11, but I also want to be really clear that circumstances change. So because I say that today doesn't necessarily mean that we won't be having a different conversation, say, a year from now.
And these 200 men are going to need services, correct, for their needs?
Of course, there are extensive services that are included in the contract.
They're going to go to existing service providers, or will new service providers have to be found in Community Board 11?
So there will be extensive services that are provided on site. So I think the goal is really to do as much as possible on site, and I will let the Lantern team talk about that. And then, certainly to the extent that somebody comes when they have a primary care physician or something like that, we will help people maintain the connections that they have in the community.
Okay, so the next question I saw at 6:46 p.m. was from iPad. I don't know who iPad is, but they say they're a homeowner in Morris Park. They're concerned with the desolate location. Basically, the subway is far away. I mean, I think there's other things, but I don't know how really relevant that is. So, what would you say? I mean, I think in some ways this is not a desolate location. I mean, it's right next to that high rise. The school's around the corner. I don't know if you want to respond to that, or we can just move on. It seems like it's more of a statement.
All I can say is that we will have transportation available. We will have vans to transport people to make sure they can get to the appointments they need to get to. And yeah, I mean, we also were trying to look at in terms of transportation in the neighborhood, and we'll be trying to figure out how to do that for the staff and for the residents, which could be maybe making our vans available at certain times during the day to transport people to subways and to other places so that they can get where they need to go, like to work or school or other types of places.
Okay, and then a question from Maria Caruso was about the list of locations for other areas. I think a board member actually texted me about that too. The address of the single men's shelter, the 113 men's shelter you guys run. I don't know if you can just maybe email me that list. I mean, I'm sure we could probably Google it. No, I don't know. It's on your website. It's for Lantern. Did everybody hear me?
Lantern to answer specifically, but you definitely can't Google it. Addresses are protected by social service law.
Okay. Okay. Can we know at least if the 113 men's shelter is in the Bronx? It's in Manhattan.
It's in Queens.
In Queens.
Okay. And then you said he run an all woman shelter, right?
In Manhattan.
Okay. Okay. And then I saw at 6:51, Jason Christie. I think some of this was answered already. Jason, so, about the property that was sold, there was a comparable rate. We looked at a comparable property, 244-3 Poplar as an example.
Jeremy, I am back.
Yeah, I think this is more or less addressed while you were gone, right? The property was sold for a lot of money. So I don't know if you want to talk specifically about 2443 Poplar and maybe why that's relevant, in your opinion, Jason?
I was just, again, coming at it from a tax expenditure perspective and a comp perspective. It just seemed, if those numbers were correct, that the developer is paid a lot of money above market. And I was just wondering how that was justified, especially given the current economy, when cities are so strapped and city budgets are so strapped.
I think that was more or less discussed. Am I wrong, board members? It was more or less addressed, right?
That's fine. I can get with someone later if the question was already answered.
I don't hear anybody. And can you ever hear me?
No, it wasn't really answered. It was sidestepped. Mark Jonah pursued it. I beg your pardon. Councilman Jonah pursued it, but it really wasn't answered. The price being paid was 100% more practically than a comparable one. It was avoided. It was not answered.
So we absolutely do look at comps. I don't know the particular site that you are looking at. There's definitely a lot of nuances in appraisal, and I'd be happy to take a look at the site that you're referencing. But we certainly do look at comps before we move forward with the project.
Okay. And then a question from Colleen. Will all residents be from New York City? I don't think, I think this, you guys take in whoever's homeless, right? It doesn't, whether they originate from New Jersey or elsewhere, right?
We are, yes, we're legally required to serve anybody who is experiencing homelessness, but the reality of it is that the overwhelming majority of people are, in fact, have prior New York City residency.
Okay. And then I see, I think this might be Ms. Delgado. Obviously we're short on time with, Homeless Services has to leave. I don't know if Lantern's staying.
Jeremy, someone had a pretty good, interesting question about the shelter. I guess it's for the Lantern. During the time when because many of the homeless men are not working, right? They don't have jobs, correct? So during the days, will they have something to do, versus just walking? I'm saying that, for example, when I was younger, there was a carpentry class, electrical shop, so you can learn a trade while you're in versus just going to sleep, waking up, doing what? Sending out your resume, just walking around, or versus being trained, 200 men being trained with a skill. That's something that I think is pretty needed. It's needed because when you're younger, you went to a shop. You learn carpentry, you learn electrical engineering, mechanical engineering, HVAC, whatever you had to do during your time of being unemployed. That would be a pretty good thing to do. I would think. What do you think?
Amy, do you want to answer that? Or
Yeah, I can certainly answer it. We certainly understand the concern that there's a concentration of people, and will they be occupied, and will they be walking around the community? We understand that concern very well. And part of the reason that I spoke about having the recreation specialists on site is because we do have programming going on at all times. And
learning a trade, because that's
I understand what you're saying.
That's helpful.
I think that's like a fantastic idea, but I will just say that honestly, we don't have the capacity to do that level of training. But what we do have is employment specialists and entitlement and employment specialists, and that's their job, to connect people to vocational training. And if that's, and to, help them to connect, to, give them Metro cards so they can get there. That's all the things that we would do. In terms of employment, we have, they also help people with their employment. And I'll be honest, I'm actually always quite surprised at just how many people are employed. And it's in fact, it's a sad thing that people are employed and yet still really can't afford housing. And so that's something that we definitely think is really important, and try to work with people to help them with employment. I mean, one of the things, I know you're talking about, are they sending out resumes? And one of the things that we do at Lantern, which is a little different than other shelters, is honestly, we give people Wi-Fi for all the residents there, so that they can access any kind of looking for employment, housing, sending out the resumes. They can just do it anywhere in the shelter. They can do it. They don't have to wait for a computer to be available to them. That we can help them to do that, in the dining room or in the recreation areas.
I hear you, Amy, but you think about it. If you don't, you have a skill, right? You have experience. You can put that information on a resume, right? If things change, which gives to the reason why someone became unemployed, that maybe that thing they used to do before doesn't exist anymore because of technology, right? It happens. So what do you do then? Do you say, we'll fill out your resume, we'll try to send you, maybe you used to work at a token booth clerk on the highway. All those are gone now. You don't have them anymore. So, and you happen to lose your job, and that's what I did for 20 years, and that's all I know, how to just collect money. I'm just saying an example of something that is obsolete now. Can you train me to maybe become an electrician, mechanical engineer, or something that can give me the opportunity to put on my resume, send out to maybe a contractor, that I can maybe work as an electrician or a plumber. Can you give me that skill?
Yes. So
I mean,
Oral,
if you don't set up a homeless shelter for someone to succeed versus just staying there and having a place to lay their head, that's the problem, and that's what people see. People see homeless people just going there, lying down, waking up, and then walking the street. That's what I see in Manhattan when I see the
Oral,
show. Go ahead, sure.
Oral, I'd love to answer that because I think that's a really, really good point. How do we connect people with who, to be honest, a lot of our folks are disconnected from the labor market, or connected from the labor market in very tangential and fragile ways, okay? So I totally get it. I think that what Amy was trying to say was that we can't do every single thing under our roof, and so I'll say it over and over again. That's just, we have some really great in our supportive housing programs, people who work directly with formerly homeless people around building skills, identifying jobs, really coaching, mentoring, doing the whole thing. Those people are living with us, and they've got a lease, and we expect them to be there for as long as they need that level of housing, so we can do that there. Here, I think the more efficient thing is for us to try to connect, do the same kind of like identification, like needs identification around employment, but then connect them with people who actually can do it. I mean, I can't do everything. I'm not going to teach somebody how to be a mechanic because I don't have the equipment, the training, or the thing. But what we can do is really think a lot more about that. I would say that within the homelessness field, people are, I've been in that since the early 90s, and I have seen people, both clients and the folks like DHS and Lantern sitting around the table, I realize that people can do a lot more around work. We need to support work, not just entitlements. And there's been a steady move. It's not complete, but it's been a steady move to really seeing people's potential to work and supporting that potential to work. And so sometimes you find, low-level jobs, that are not very skilled, just to get them into the habit of work. And then we build on that to get them more additional training. But it's one of the things I would say in the last 10 years is beginning really to take off and become standard policy, operating procedure. And so, yeah, we still have lots to learn.
So
I would love to follow up on that, and forgive me if you guys have already discussed this already. I apologize. I had to be in another call for this evening, but I think whatever we feel about the homeless population and their rights to a dignified existence, et cetera, having lived in different neighborhoods across the city that had shelters, in my experience, what really was the problem that residents really objected to was this population of residents in these shelters who were both mentally ill and chemically addicted. And of course, this population is not employable. And they're the ones that we're worried about, because they're the ones that are wandering the streets around the shelter, and doesn't look great, and it's also like getting into trouble. So I don't know if you are able to speak specifically, but I'm wondering generally, are you able to give us some idea of what percentage typically of one of your residences are this population? Is it like 20% that's usually MICA or more? Like, how does that work? And what do you, and more importantly, what do you guys do to support that population so they don't create that friction between the community, which frankly is where all of this resistance comes from? Because I think most people are, have enough empathy in their hearts to say that this population deserves a place to stay. It's this MICA population that's, the wandering the streets that are causing the issues that we're all really worried about.
Can I jump in, Diane, before you respond? I want to be clear that DHS does shelter assignment centrally, right? So Lantern Group doesn't have the opportunity to pick and choose the clients that they're going to be serving. So we are looking at the folks who are coming into intake, prioritizing based on previous residences and home in borough, as I talked about, and doing that matching. So I think it's difficult. It's going to be hard for Lantern to be able to say, you know, it's X% or it's Y% because we're the ones doing.
Yeah, you don't control the admissions, but you have enough history to be able to speak generally about statistics. No.
You know, I'm just gonna jump in on this one, because what we really can speak to from experience and from history is that all the things that you've mentioned are if you want to look at statistics, you can pretty much look at the general population and see the incidence of mental health issues, chemical addiction issues. So what happens, though, I think, when people become homeless is sometimes they fall out of those systems of care that other people might have, insurance, work, jobs, etc. The actual issues that they're dealing with, just like anything else, is cyclical, they change, they have ups, they have downs. What we try to do is bring a really strong grounding in how do you deal with both physical and emotional or behavioral health consequences. So, you know, this is, you're right, it definitely happens within both families, but it seems to be more prevalent among single adults. And what we deal with and what Lantern has been about is really thinking through and bringing to people the things that are most likely to stabilize and help them be successful. So that, you know, so it's, I guess what I'm saying to you is that, yeah, there will be some incidents. We will have, it's there, but we, like every single program director at Lantern and all those 18 sites, we've talked to licensed social workers or MSWs with years and years of experience. We support our staff. We have one of the best professional development and training. I think programs across the not-for-profit homeless and supportive housing industry. We are not going to be able to take that away, but we really do address them in constructive.
I hear you, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but my question is, what programs specifically do you guys have to support this population so it doesn't create that friction in the community? Like, how do you support that population at Lantern?
Do you want to do that, and then I'll come back to another thing that I just want to come back to.
How do we support? I'm going to talk about how we would support the population in the shelter. I mean, I think that it's really about there's really a tremendous amount of support within the shelter. There's social workers, case managers, there's housing specialists, there's peers, and the peers are really there because they have some kind of lived experience, which hopefully can help connect with people who are not so easy to connect with. And it's about really training those staff and making sure that they understand what the issues are and can really, work with people. But I kind of feel like it's a twofold thing. I think there's the services that we provide, but then there's also looking at what's going on in the community and looking at what's our function in terms of outreach, community engagement, because, things are going to happen. People are going to be out there in the community, and, we want to be responsive. We want to hear about if one of our residents is causing a problem, we want to know about it and we want to respond to it. And so it's really twofold. It's really giving people the support they need within the shelter. And in this particular location, we'll have a medical provider on site, which is pretty unique. We'll be able to put in there'll be medical staff on site there. But maybe when that doesn't always work, because it doesn't always work, we also will have the security and community outreach also to sort of support making sure that we're aware of what's going on in the community. and trying to prevent things from happening.
So hold on, Jason. Roxanne Delgado, I think she had a question. Roxanne, are you still here?
Two very pragmatic points, I think, just to piggyback off
hello?
what was said before. Sorry. One, DHS shelters used to require that everybody left during the day. That is no longer the case, right? So people can be indoors during the day. And also, I think, as was mentioned in the presentation, the site's going to have some dedicated outdoor space, which I think will also really help with making sure that folks are on site. Right.
So Roxanne, you're here? So.
Yes, I would like to ask if the provider, Lantern, can hold a meeting for the public so the public can ask questions, because it always seems like the public is always considered last and committee board 11. So hopefully either Lantern could send their contact information so I could follow up with questions, or they could hold their own public meeting so the public can ask questions. Thank you.
Okay, I don't know if anyone else had questions. I wasn't really able to keep track of anything else thereafter because I was too busy, getting text messages, getting chats from private chats, yada, yada, emails.
Hey, Jeremy, just to respond to Ms. Roxanne Delgado, this is your opportunity. You are a member of the public, and right now it's open to the public, so please ask your question.
Excuse me, it's almost 9:15 now. I think it's best just for this provider to provide a public meeting so public members besides myself can ask their questions, because there was so much focus on the purchase price, and we should have focused more on what services and any input we could have on the design, and that was ignored. And all we could spoke for the last hour and a half was how much and who bought it, and it's like you make it seem like you're paying for it. I honestly think that was a waste of time, but again, maybe we could address these issues next time. Have a good night.
Thank you.
So I don't know if that's possible from the Lantern Group, having another meeting with the public.
Jeremy, it's Nicole. I have Ms. Delgado's information as well, so I can also follow up with her and share it with Lantern. We can make sure to follow up after this conversation.
Thank
you. Is there anyone else from the public? I mean, again, I apologize. I couldn't keep track of every comment or question. So I think we, for the most part, got it. If you didn't get your question asked, we will do our best to follow up. Please let us know. So thank you very much. Home Services, Lantern.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Thank you so much.
We're going to continue on with our meeting. You're more than welcome to stay. But we got old business, new business, and DHCR issue. I think briefly Hazel wanted to speak about. Thank you, Hazel.
Okay. I'm going to beg off. I've been from 7:30 this morning. All right, so
no
almost
problem.
without a break. All right, thank you
Jeremy.
very much.
I'll follow up with you if there's any additional question or comments for Lantern and DHS. I'll follow up with you in the morning, Jeremy.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you,
everyone, for your time
Thank you all.
and attention.
Good night.
Good night.
Hazel.
Okay, so we didn't have anybody from DHCR, but the COVID Relief Fund application has been available again, and I think it's going to be available till like the middle of February. If anybody has any questions about it, they can probably find that out on their website, or you can contact me at NIDC. We are assisting with the application process. The moratorium has been extended another, I believe 60 days or 90 days. I'm not sure because I get mixed information. So, and like I said in the beginning of the meeting, I don't know what's going to happen once that moratorium expires. I also wanted to talk about increasing our committee membership. Right now, there's only 4 of us. And as you can see from this discussion, housing is a very big issue in this community, and there are a lot of issues that need to be addressed. And right now we're looking at the Van Nest area and absentee landlords over there. So I'm hoping that anybody that wants to join the committee, please do. We need as many people as possible to help us address everything that's going on. So I open it to the gallery session if we have anybody left to ask questions or make comments or whatever.
Nope. Hazel, any old business or new business?
I don't have anything right now, no.
Okay, anybody else from the committee? I know Janice, I think she jumped off at some point. I don't know if Joanne or Pat Charles.
I think Pat had to leave to another meeting.
Okay. So, so then it's, you want to make a motion to adjourn?
No questions.
Okay, motion to
You
adjourn.
hear
Hazel?
me?
Yes, yes, Joanne, thank you.
Oh.
Motion to adjourn, Hazel?
Yeah, let's do that. First, I want to thank everybody for showing up. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, we did not, we got up to 60 something people, I think at most, not 100.
My pleasure, my pleasure.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, everybody. It's
Okay,
8:50
good night,
p.m.
guys.
Good night, thanks. Good night,
Meeting ends at
everybody.
8:50
All right, good night.
p.m.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.